Now, before we get into creating our own website, the first thing I want to mention to you is that usually after defining your site and defining where your site root folder is located, I usually like to take the time to create a skeleton of my website. In other words, just lay down the bare bones foundation of all of the elements that will populate your root folder. In this case, we've only got an index.html file inside of our root folder. And you may remember in the previous video when we created that root folder, it was located right here on our desktop. And within that root folder at the moment, you can see that we only have the index.html page. However, this is also reflected in the Files menu where we've defined our site as well. So whatever we do in here is going to happen in that root folder on the desktop. So we've got the first page of our website. And as you remember, the index.html is the name that we generally use for the first page of any given website. Well, within this website, we'll oftentimes be using a number of other elements. For example, we're more than likely going to have some images in here. So I'll create a new folder, and we'll give that folder the very standard name of images. At any given moment, we'll be more than likely adding some CSS. So I'll create a new folder to store our CSS, and this CSS folder is going to be used for the best type of CSS, an external CSS file. Now, there may be some other elements that we won't get to for quite some time, but inevitably you might have some scripts or JS or JavaScript rather, and we'll just call this folder the scripts folder. Also, you might need to have more than one page. As we have all of our assets or the empty folders for our assets placed in here, inevitably they become sort of arranged alphabetically in the structure, and our index page is before the scripts, as you can see here. That's why it's very common to see that your CSS folder may have an underscore before it. Same thing can be said for the images. And you'll see exactly why this is useful. Because once you click on an item and then click on it again, it gives you the opportunity to rename that item. And by placing an underscore before all of our asset folder names, this will allow us to have the elements always organized up at the top. So if I hit the refresh here, you'll see that the CSS images and scripts folder is right here. Now, if you have more than one page, now if we only had like 2 or 3 pages, it really isn't a big deal to have all of those pages right next to the index page. However, if you end up with many more pages, perhaps for example you have a clothing store and you want to have a products section, you can have product pages and different elements stored within their own folder. Now, I'm going to do this by creating a folder. Again, given the fact that we don't have a theme particularly in mind for this first little practice website that we're creating here, I'm just going to call this folder web. Within the web folder, then, you can have a number of other files. So I'm going to right click and say new file. And the first new file, let's just call it the about page, for example. And then perhaps we'll create another new file which we'll call contact. And perhaps we'll have another new file which at this moment I'll just call portfolio. Let's imagine that we're creating a simple website for ourselves and we want to showcase some of our portfolio work. So as you can see here, this is very common basic structure inside of any given website. Now, if I wanted to, eventually we're going to add some fonts, but since it's an asset to our website, I'm going to put an underscore before it and we'll say fonts. And if we were to refresh this, you'll see that it is organized always at the top with the rest of our elements. I could put the other web pages with an underscore as well, but since it's not just a supporting asset. It's actually part of what we want to be working with. I'm going to just leave it with the name web right here. So these are very common elements that you would see inside any given website. We may, in fact, inevitably introduce some video into our work. You may also inevitably introduce some sound into your work. So all of these folders will then be populated inside your root. If we were to minimize Dreamweaver for a second, go back to the root underscore folder, you'll see that all those folders have been introduced. And within the web folder, there are those other HTML pages. Now these pages don't have anything on them, just like the index page. If I double click it, you can see here in the split screen view that while there is some HTML tags involved in making this page look the way it does, there's actually no content in here. Same thing goes for the About page and the other ones. And you'll notice right here at the top left that you can jump between the About and the Index page just by moving back and forth in this fashion. So let's come back in the next video, and when we do, we're going to look at the index.html page that we've created, and we'll start populating some information directly inside of it.